My hands were shaking so hard the keys on my school laptop sounded like teeth clacking. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I was staring at my little sister's palm, at a tiny plastic bag of pills that didn't belong to me, while my parents' eyes locked onto my face, like they'd finally found proof of everything they'd ever wanted to believe about me. I'm Maya, 16F, and in our house, guilt doesn't need evidence. It just needs a target. It happened during something stupidly normal, a closet cleanout, a Saturday that should have smelled like dusty sweaters and old notebooks, not panic. My twin brother Jason, 16 months, and I share a bedroom. We always have. Same age, same grade, same hallway that echoes with our parents' voices every time they decide one of us is the better twin this week. Our younger sister Nora, 11F, was helping us sort old shoes into piles on the floor. Jason was joking about how our parents would probably give $50 to whichever twin could throw out the most junk. I remember laughing, one of those tiny laughs that doesn't reach your chest, because even when we joke about it, the truth still stings. Then Nora squealed like she'd found treasure. "Look what I found!" She ran downstairs holding the bag up between two fingers like it was a prize. For 1 second, I didn't even understand what I was seeing. The plastic crinkled in her hand. The pills inside were small, pale, and wrong in the way your body recognizes danger before your brain labels it. My stomach dropped. I followed her into the kitchen, my heartbeat getting louder with every step. Jason trailed behind me, confused, rubbing sleep out of his eyes like the whole thing was still a joke. It wasn't. My mom's face went tight first. My dad's chair scraped the floor so hard it made a screech that crawled up my spine. "What is that?" my dad snapped. Nora held it out proudly. "It was in the closet, behind the books." And then, like a switch flipped, both of them turned toward me. Not Jason, me. My mom's eyes narrowed, sharp and satisfied, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Like she'd been waiting to finally be right about me. "Explain," she said. My voice cracked instantly. "I don't know what that is." My dad didn't even pause to consider it. He just stood up so fast his knees knocked the table. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying," I insisted, and I could hear my own pulse rushing in my ears. "I've never seen those before." My mom grabbed my wrist, hard. Not a gentle grip, a claiming grip. She yanked me to the kitchen table like I was already convicted, and she was just moving me to sentencing. Jason stepped forward. "Wait, why are you—" "Stay out of this," my dad barked at him without even looking. And that's when I knew something terrifying. This wasn't about the pills. This was about the story they'd already written about me. My dad stormed upstairs to search our room. I could hear drawers being ripped open. My mom stood over me, arms crossed, breathing through her nose like she was trying not to explode. Every time I tried to speak, she cut me off. "After everything we've done for you, do you know how disgusting this is? Where did you get them?" I kept repeating the same truth. "They aren't mine," but my words hit the air and fell dead on the tile. Then my dad came back down holding 2 more small bags like trophies. "One under her bed," he said, voice booming, "and one taped under the desk drawer." Jason's face went white. Nora looked like she might cry. And I just sat there, frozen, because my brain couldn't make it make sense. 3 bags. In my space. In my life. In my name. My mom didn't ask questions anymore. She announced punishments like she was reading a grocery list. My phone, my laptop, grounded indefinitely. No friends. No weekends, only school and home. And then she added the part that felt like a knife twisted slowly. "And you'll be doing Jason and Nora's chores too, for the next 6 months, since you clearly have time to get into this kind of trouble." Jason tried to protest again. "Mom, she—" My dad slammed his palm on the table. "Enough!" The sound made Nora flinch. I remember staring at my mother's wedding ring as she gestured, gold catching the kitchen light, and thinking, she doesn't even care if it's true. She just cares that she gets to be angry at me. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like the air in the room had turned thick. Jason faced the other wall, silent. Nora's bedroom down the hall was quiet except for one soft sniffle, like she was trying not to cry loud enough for anyone to hear. And in the dark, with my parents' anger still vibrating through the walls, one memory surfaced, sharp, unavoidable. 3 months ago, Jason had asked me for something I refused. He'd wanted me to hide something for him. I told him no. I told him I didn't want to be involved. And now there were pills in my room like a trap someone had set, or a mistake someone was desperate enough to make. I didn't know yet which one it was, but I knew this. If I didn't figure out the truth fast, my parents were going to destroy me over a story they were already enjoying. And the worst part, I wasn't even sure my own twin was on my side anymore. To understand why my parents didn't hesitate to believe I was guilty, you have to understand how our family has always worked. I'm Maya, 16 years old, a junior in high school, and technically the responsible twin. That's the label they give me when it suits them, when my grades are higher, when I don't talk back, when I do what I'm told without making noise. My twin brother Jason is different. Not worse, not better. Just different in a way our parents refuse to see as neutral. Jason is charming. He's quick with jokes, good at sports, the kind of kid teachers describe as having potential. I'm the one who plans ahead. I color code my notes. I stay up late rewriting essays until they're airtight. We're two sides of the same coin, but in our house, coins are ranked, and ranked loudly. Our parents don't even pretend to hide it. Every month, they hand $50 to whichever twin has the better grades. Not both of us. One winner, one loser. If Jason gets a B plus and I get an A minus, I get the money. If the next month it flips, so does the reward. They announce it at dinner like it's a game show result. Well, my dad will say, tapping the report cards, looks like Jason takes it this time. Sometimes they attend Jason's soccer game instead of my debate meet. Sometimes it's the other way around. Whoever they pick becomes the good child of the week. The other one gets silence, or worse, commentary. Why can't you be more like your brother? See, Maya, Jason actually tries. At least one of you knows how to succeed. They say these things casually, like observations, like facts. When we were younger, Jason and I used to fight about it constantly. Screaming matches behind our bedroom door. Accusations. Tears. But as we got older, something shifted. We realized the fights weren't really about each other. They were about survival. When our parents weren't around, Jason and I were, okay, not inseparable, but not enemies either. We'd complain about the same things, roll our eyes at the same lectures, share snacks late at night, and whisper about how unfair everything felt. Our younger sister Nora doesn't get treated this way. She's 11, still safely outside the competition bracket. She gets affection without conditions, hugs without performance reviews. Watching her grow up so differently from us feels surreal, like she's living in an alternate version of our family. Jason and I learned early that love here is transactional, so we adapted. I adapted by planning my escape. I told myself I'd endure it, keep my head down, get good grades, and leave for college as soon as I could. Jason adapted by chasing approval more aggressively. Sports, charisma, shortcuts. That's where the pills came in. 3 months ago, he came into our room after school, closed the door, and dropped his backpack onto his bed. Maya, he said, lowering his voice, I need a favor. I already didn't like the way he said it. He told me about the study drugs, how kids at school used them to cram, how they helped him focus, how he was falling behind and couldn't afford another month where I won. I just need you to hold on to them, he said. Just for a bit. You're not going to get searched. I remember the exact way my stomach twisted. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. He tried to laugh it off at first. Then he got defensive. Then angry. You think you're better than me? He snapped. That's not what this is, I said. I just don't want to get dragged into something illegal. I even told him, quietly but clearly, that if he asked again, I'd tell our parents. He stared at me like I'd betrayed him. Then he dropped it, or so I thought. After that, things between us were tense for a while, but they always are. Eventually, we slipped back into our uneasy truce. Shared jokes, shared silence. No more talk about pills. That's why, when my parents pulled those plastic bags out of my space, my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. Because Jason knows exactly what our parents are like. He knows they would never hesitate to blame me. And yet, here I was, stripped of my voice, labeled guilty, punished without a trial. Lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan, I kept replaying everything, every word, every look, trying to answer one question I wasn't ready to face. Was this an accident born from fear? Or had my own twin decided I was expendable? The next morning felt wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Nothing had changed on the surface. Same hallway, same kitchen table, same clink of my dad's spoon against his mug. But the air was heavier, like the house itself had decided I was guilty too. My phone was gone. My laptop sat locked in my parents' bedroom drawer. The only reason I could still write anything at all was because the school-issued laptop stayed at school. And technically, I hadn't been expelled. Yet. Mom didn't say good morning. She slid a plate of toast onto the counter without looking at me, then turned her attention to Jason and Nora like I wasn't standing there. Bus leaves in 10 minutes, she said. Jason avoided my eyes. Nora kept glancing at me, her face scrunched up in confusion and guilt, like she felt responsible for lighting the fuse. I wanted to scream that none of this was my fault. Instead, I grabbed my backpack and left. At school, rumors move faster than facts. By lunchtime, people were whispering. Someone asked if it was true I'd been caught with stuff. Another girl gave me that look, the one that's half curiosity, half judgment. Jason didn't sit with me at lunch. That hurt more than I expected. When we got home, my parents barely acknowledged me. They handed me a list of chores that now included Jason's and Nora's: laundry, dishes, vacuuming, trash, dog walking. It was punishment disguised as responsibility. Jason watched from the doorway while I folded his clothes. I didn't mean for this to happen, he muttered. I looked up slowly. Then how did it happen? He swallowed. I don't know. That was the moment doubt hardened into something sharper, because there were only two options. Either someone else had planted the pills in my room, or Jason had, and there was no universe where that happened by accident. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe on the other side of the room, replaying everything from the past 3 months, every awkward silence, every too quick apology, every time he'd watched our parents tear into me without stepping in. The next day, something small, but telling, happened. Dad came home early and announced he was doing another sweep of the room. Jason froze. Just the closet? Jason asked casually. Too casually. Dad paused. Why? Jason shrugged. Just wondering. Dad didn't answer. He went upstairs. Minutes later, he came back down holding another bag. That's when I knew. Jason's question had given him away. That evening, I waited until our parents left to run errands. I closed our bedroom door and sat on my bed, hands clenched together so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Jason, I said quietly, we need to talk. He didn't look at me at first. I know those pills are yours, I said, and I need to hear the truth, now. He exhaled like the air had finally gone out of him. They were mine, he admitted, but I didn't mean to frame you. I stared at him. You hid them in my room. I didn't think they'd search that hard, he said quickly. I split them up so if they found one stash, I wouldn't lose everything. Everything. Not us, not me. Everything. Then he said something that made my stomach drop even further. I was going to sell some of them, he admitted. That's why there were so many. I felt sick. I told him he had 2 days. 2. To tell our parents the truth. If he didn't, I would. He nodded, eyes wet, voice shaking. I'm sorry. But I'd grown up in this house long enough to know the difference between regret and fear. And fear always wins here. 2 days passed. Jason didn't say a word. Not to our parents, not to me, not to anyone. Those 48 hours felt longer than the entire 16 years I'd spent in that house. I watched him carefully, how he avoided my eyes, how his leg bounced nonstop at the dinner table, how he flinched every time our dad raised his voice. Fear clung to him like static. But fear didn't turn into honesty. It turned into silence. On the second night, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and said, You're running out of time. He looked up from his phone, eyes glassy. I can't, he whispered. That was it. Something in me went cold. Not angry, not loud, just done. I realized then that if I didn't save myself, no one else in this house would. The next morning, I wrote the letter. I didn't do it dramatically. No tears splashing onto the page, no shaking hands. I sat at my desk after everyone left for work and school, opened a blank document on my school laptop, and wrote like I was building a case for my own survival. I stated facts, clear, calm, unemotional. The pills were not mine. I do not use illegal substances. The pills belong to my twin brother, Jason. He uses them and sells them to other students. That sentence made my chest tighten, but I kept going. I proposed drug tests for both of us. Specific ones. Hair tests. The kind that don't care about last-minute excuses. The kind that tell the truth even when people try to hide it. And then I added the part I hadn't planned. I wrote about the competition, about the money for grade system, about the favoritism that changed weekly, about how being compared constantly had driven a wedge between siblings who might have otherwise supported each other. I wrote one sentence that I knew would hurt them the most because it was true. If this is how things continue, I don't see myself having a relationship with you once I'm old enough to leave. I folded the letter neatly and left it on the passenger seat of the car before Mom drove me to school. She didn't notice it at first. At least she didn't say anything. When I got home that afternoon, both my parents were sitting at the kitchen table. 2 unopened drug tests sat between them. My heart started pounding. Jason walked in behind me, stopped short when he saw them, and went pale. My mom spoke first. "We're testing both of you." Jason bolted. He ran to the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it. Seconds later, the buzzing sound of an electric razor cut through the house. Nora started crying. Dad was already moving. He grabbed a tool from the drawer, he's always been able to pick locks, and forced the door open. Jason stood there, hair uneven, half his head shaved, tears streaking down his face, like he could erase the truth by destroying the evidence. But there was still enough hair, enough truth. The test went out that same day. When the results came back, my name was clean. Jason's wasn't. The switch flipped instantly. My phone was handed back, my laptop returned, my grounding erased like it had never existed. Every punishment, every chore, every restriction was transferred to him. Just like that. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd put me through. It was like the past week had never happened. Jason handed me the $50 he'd gotten for having better grades the month before. His hand was shaking. "I was going to use it for more pills," he said quietly. I pushed it back. "Give it back to them." He did, and then he stopped talking to me altogether. That night, lying in bed, I felt hollow. Vindicated, yes, but also painfully aware of something darker. This wasn't justice. It was just the game resetting, with new roles, and I was still trapped inside it. After the test results came back, the house snapped back into its old rhythm so quickly it made my head spin. One day I was the problem child. The next, I was invisible again, only this time, in a way that felt worse. My parents didn't apologize. They didn't sit me down and say they were wrong. They didn't ask how it felt to be screamed at for hours over something I hadn't done. They acted like correcting the punishment was enough, like restoring my phone and laptop erased the damage. Mom even said casually while loading the dishwasher, "Well, at least we know the truth now." As if the truth hadn't been screaming at them the whole time. Jason barely left our room. When he did, he moved like a ghost, eyes down, shoulders rounded, absorbing criticism from every direction. My parents had swung hard in the opposite direction. Now he couldn't do anything right. "You're a disappointment," my dad said one night when Jason forgot to take out the trash. "Your sister would never make a mistake like that." I flinched, not because I felt proud, because I recognized the pattern. This wasn't accountability, it was just cruelty with a new target. Jason didn't speak to me at all, not a word, not a glance. I understood why. Turning him in had cost him everything. But that understanding didn't erase the knot in my chest. He'd hurt me badly. He'd nearly ruined my life. And still, he was my twin. I kept replaying that night in my head. The pills, the yelling, the way my mom's hand had dug into my wrist, the way my dad hadn't let me finish a single sentence. I started asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. Why did I need evidence to be believed? Why did Jason only need doubt to be forgiven before, and now only needed guilt to be destroyed? What did that say about the kind of home we were growing up in? A week later, I overheard something that shifted everything. I was walking past the backyard late at night when I saw Jason sitting on the steps, head in his hands. He didn't hear me at first. "I can't do anything right," he whispered to himself. I froze. I'd never heard him sound like that. Not angry, not defensive, just empty. I sat down beside him without saying anything. We stared up at the dark sky for a long time, the cicadas loud enough to fill the silence. Finally, he spoke. "They found more pills in my locker today," he said. "I'm suspended for a week." My stomach dropped. "They don't know yet," he added quickly. "The school couldn't reach them." He looked terrified, not just of getting caught, but of what would happen next, of being crushed again, of being reduced to a single mistake forever. And suddenly I saw it. I'd been planning my escape for years. Jason had been drowning in place. He told me the pills helped him focus, helped him keep up, helped him win, at least sometimes. He said the pressure made his chest feel tight all the time. That being compared to me felt like suffocating. "I know what I did was wrong," he said quietly. "I know I hurt you, but I didn't know how else to survive here." That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. That night, lying in bed, I realized something terrifying and clarifying all at once. If we stayed in this house, neither of us would make it out intact. And for the first time, I wondered if the real enemy had never been my twin at all. After that night in the backyard, something shifted inside me, and not gently. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen in Jason's face. The fear wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about worth, about whether he'd ever be anything other than the wrong twin in our parents' eyes. And the worst part? I knew exactly how that felt. The house grew tighter after his suspension. Our parents didn't know yet, but tension has a smell, sharp and metallic, like rain before a storm. Jason barely ate. He stopped doing homework. He jumped every time our dad called his name. Meanwhile, I became the favorite again. Mom started praising me at dinner, loudly. See how Maya keeps her grades up? She doesn't need shortcuts. She actually thinks about her future. Every compliment landed like a bruise. I wanted to scream at them to stop, to tell them they were doing it again, splitting us, rewarding one child while tearing down the other. But every time I opened my mouth, my dad shot me a warning look. "Stay out of it," he said once, flat and final. That's when I understood something else. They weren't interested in fixing anything. They needed this dynamic. It fed them, gave them control, kept us small and dependent and desperate for approval. 2 nights later, I made a decision I'd been avoiding my entire life. I called my older brother Matt, 25M. Matt moved out the second he turned 18. We don't talk much, not because we don't care, but because distance was the only way he knew how to survive our family. When he answered, his voice was calm in a way that felt unreal compared to the chaos in my house. "Maya," he said, "what's wrong?" I told him everything. The pills, the framing, the competition, the favoritism, the way Jason was unraveling. He didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. They did the same thing to me and Emma. Emma, our older sister, 23F. The one who left at 18 and barely comes home. The one people describe as difficult without ever asking why. Matt told me things I'd never known, how our parents pitted him and Emma against each other constantly, how Emma developed an eating disorder trying to be perfect, how he spiraled into depression before finally getting out. "That's why I offered before," he said quietly, "to take you guys in. I wasn't being dramatic. I was trying to interrupt the cycle." He told me he'd recently bought a 3-bedroom house, that he'd been planning to rent out the extra rooms, that if Jason and I wanted to come live with him, he'd make it work. Even Nora, he said, visits on weekends, a place to breathe. I sat on my bed, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers went numb. A way out, not just for me, but for Jason too. The next step was the hardest. Telling him. That night, I sat beside Jason on the floor of our room. He looked exhausted, hollowed out in a way no 16-year-old should ever look. "I talked to Matt," I said. He stiffened. "Why?" "Because this house is breaking us," I said honestly, "and because there's another option." I told him everything Matt had said. The house, the schools, the possibility of a life without constant comparison. Jason didn't get excited. He looked suspicious. "Why would you help me?" he asked, "after what I did to you?" "Because that question mattered," I answered truthfully. "Because what our parents are doing is worse than what you did," I said. "And if we stay here, we're both going to lose." He started crying then, really crying, not quietly, not defensively. He admitted he'd been thinking about running away, that he'd saved a little money, that he didn't have a real plan beyond escape. We talked for hours about the past, about how much of our rivalry had been manufactured, about who we might have been in a different house. By the end of the night, we agreed. We'd call Matt together. And we wouldn't tell our parents yet, because for the first time in our lives, we were choosing ourselves over the game they'd forced us to play. The days after we decided to leave were some of the heaviest of my life. Nothing had technically changed yet. We still woke up in the same rooms, ate at the same table, listened to the same voices, but now there was a countdown ticking inside my chest, and every moment felt stretched thin by the knowledge that this was temporary. Jason and I started moving through the house like conspirators. We didn't whisper plans out loud. We didn't write anything down. We just exchanged looks, small nods, half sentences, unfinished thoughts. We packed only what mattered and hid it at the back of our closets. Old photos, a hoodie that still smelled like summer, a notebook full of half-written thoughts I'd never shown anyone. Our parents didn't notice, or maybe they did and didn't care. Jason's suspension finally came to light when the school reached them. The explosion was exactly as bad as we'd expected, worse somehow, because now it was personal again. My dad yelled until his voice cracked. "You've ruined your future," he shouted. "Do you have any idea how stupid you are?" My mom stood there shaking her head, repeating, "After everything we've done for you." Jason didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor, jaw clenched so tight I thought it might break. I stepped in. "Stop," I said. My voice was calm, but my heart was racing. This didn't happen in a vacuum. The pressure. "Stay out of it," my dad snapped. "This doesn't concern you." It did. It concerned me more than anything ever had. That night, Jason came into my room and thanked me for standing up for him. It was the first time either of us had said something like that out loud. It felt fragile, like glass, something that could shatter if handled wrong. A few days later, Nora overheard us. She stood in the hallway, small and furious and shaking, demanding to know why we were talking about living somewhere else. When we finally told her the truth, that we were going to stay with Matt, her face crumpled. "You're leaving me," she said. The guilt hit harder than anything my parents had ever said. We promised to call her every day, to visit, to come get her if things ever got bad. She made us swear, hands stacked, eyes serious, that when she turned 16, we'd help her leave too if she needed it. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was abandoning her the same way our parents accused me of abandoning Jason weeks earlier. The doubt crept in quietly. What if leaving makes everything worse? What if Jason relapses? What if Matt changes his mind? What if this is just running away? I watched Jason carefully during those days. He barely slept. His hands shook sometimes. He'd sit on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing, like he was bracing for impact. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This was a kid breaking under the weight of being measured and found lacking his entire life. The darkest moment came late one night when I found him sitting in the backyard again, same spot as before. "I thought about just disappearing," he said quietly. "Not dying, just leaving, without telling anyone." My chest tightened painfully. That was the moment I knew we couldn't wait anymore. Staying was no longer neutral. Staying was dangerous. I didn't tell Jason I was going to call Matt that night. I didn't want to pressure him or make him feel like he was the one holding us back. But the longer I sat with the weight of this house, the longer I saw how it was draining everything out of him, the more I realized there was no other option. I couldn't keep waiting for some magical change. I couldn't keep hoping things would get better when every day felt like a repeat of the last. If we stayed, Jason would fall apart. If we stayed, I'd suffocate under the pressure of being the good twin, the responsible one. And Nora? I couldn't let her grow up here, watching all of this and thinking it was normal. Watching us break under our parents' cruelty, just to survive in a house that never wanted us to succeed unless we were fighting for scraps of approval. I called Matt. He answered on the first ring. His voice, as always, was calm, steady, like the one thing in my world that still made sense. "Hey," he said, "what's going on?" "I need to do this now," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I need you to help us get out of here, Jason and me both. I'm scared of what's happening to him. I'm scared of what's happening to me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Matt's breath steadying, like he was holding himself back from reacting. "I'll drive down tomorrow," he said finally. "Pack your things. We'll figure this out. You two don't have to stay there anymore." I felt a rush of relief that almost knocked me off my feet. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe an argument, maybe him telling me I wasn't ready, maybe him suggesting we try something else. But he didn't. He just accepted it. Jason didn't say anything when I told him. I didn't expect him to. He just looked at me, his eyes unreadable, and then nodded. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were both on the same page. This wasn't just about me trying to fix everything. It wasn't just about escaping our parents' mess. This was about us doing it together, surviving this together, even if it meant leaving our whole life behind. When Matt arrived the next day, everything felt surreal. It felt like the universe had shifted in our favor for once. I didn't know how we'd make it work, but I didn't care. As long as I was away from the house, away from the constant cycle of approval and rejection, I could breathe again. Jason packed his things in silence. I packed mine too. Things I knew I could live without but couldn't quite let go of yet. The photo albums, some old notebooks, a jacket my mom gave me that still smelled like her perfume. When Matt's car pulled up in front of the house, my heart was in my throat. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel possible. But then Matt was standing there, with his hands in his pockets, ready to take us somewhere that wasn't here. Somewhere better. "Ready?" he asked, his voice softer than I expected. Jason didn't say anything, but I did. "Yeah, let's go." We left the house that afternoon. Jason was quieter than usual, but I could see the tension in his shoulders starting to relax the moment we drove away. The weight of our parents' disapproval, the crushing silence, the constant comparisons. He seemed to shed it in increments as we moved further and further from our childhood home. I didn't know what to expect when we arrived at Matt's place, but the moment we pulled into his driveway, it felt different. There was something light about it. The air wasn't as thick with tension, and the house itself felt like a place you could breathe in, not just exist. Matt had a 3-bedroom house in a quiet part of town, tucked between two tree-lined streets. It wasn't fancy, nothing like the house we'd left behind, but it felt like home. His place smelled like coffee and fresh air, not the stale weight of secrets. Matt had already set up the room for Jason and me, though we weren't exactly prepared for what came next. Jason didn't immediately start unpacking his things. He just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. For a moment, I thought he might crumble again. I could see the weight of everything still clinging to him, but at least now it wasn't being constantly added to by the pressure of our parents' constant need for control. I didn't know how to fix Jason, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. But what I did know was this: he had to be given space to heal. We both did. Matt didn't ask questions when we arrived. He didn't try to pry or make us talk about what happened. He just set up a quiet dinner for us. Some simple pasta, salad, and a bottle of wine. No fanfare. No, let's talk about everything speech. Just a calm, welcoming space where we didn't have to pretend anymore. That night, Jason finally spoke. "I think I'm finally allowed to breathe," he said, looking out the window at the quiet neighborhood. I didn't know how to respond at first. The words caught in my throat. Part of me wanted to cry for everything we had lost, everything we had endured. But another part of me felt something else. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to be free of the chains we had grown up with. That week, Matt set boundaries, rules that were different from the ones we had followed at home. For the first time in years, Jason and I weren't treated like competition. Matt let us have our space, but he also kept us grounded. He made sure we both stayed on track with school, but he never judged. He listened when we needed to vent, and when we didn't want to talk, he respected that too. And as we settled into our new life, I started to realize something. The fallout from our parents, the guilt they tried to burden us with, would always be there in some form. But here, in Matt's house, we were learning how to live without it, without their constant commentary, without the expectations that had been shoved down our throats for as long as we could remember. Jason started going to therapy. He didn't ask for my help with it. He didn't need to. He just started making small steps toward healing on his own. I think I did too. We began rebuilding our lives in a way we'd never been allowed to before. Jason found a part-time job at a local cafe. I started writing again, something I hadn't had time for in years. We went to the gym together, spent Saturdays exploring new places, and slowly, we began to make friends who didn't know us as the competitive twins. But the fallout didn't end there. 3 weeks later, I got an email from an aunt, a relative who was still talking to Mom. She said Mom was furious. Apparently, our mother had called her crying, claiming I'd humiliated her in front of the family. She even apologized for everything she'd done, but she added, Maya never understood what we did for her. And there it was again. The same old story, the same old manipulation. I didn't respond to the email. Neither did Jason. We had already given our family enough energy, and I was done with it. We had chosen this new life, and no amount of guilt-tripping or emotional manipulation was going to change that. We had chosen freedom, and with that came peace. But the echoes of our past still haunted us. Mom wasn't going to let go of the control she'd always had over us. But we had control now too, and it was ours to keep. The weeks that followed our move to Matt's house passed quietly, like a slow, steady rhythm we could finally get used to. Jason and I settled into a routine that was foreign to us, but comforting in its simplicity. We went to school. We worked. We found time to relax. We didn't have to prove ourselves anymore to anyone. The weight of competition was finally lifted. But it wasn't just about escaping our parents. It was about rediscovering who we were without the chains that had bound us for so long. I found myself again. Jason did too. We weren't perfect, and we didn't have all the answers, but we had space to breathe and to rebuild. Matt became more than just an older brother to us. He was our anchor. And though our relationship with him was still new and fragile, it was 1,000 times healthier than what we had left behind. Nora called every day. She seemed to understand, even at 11, that this wasn't just about leaving home. It was about giving us the chance to live without the constant pressure and manipulation. It was about finding peace, something she would understand one day when she grew older. And as for our parents, they didn't stop trying to pull us back. They sent letters. They made calls. They sent messages from cousins and aunts. They said we were breaking the family apart. They said we were selfish. They said we'd regret it. But we didn't answer. We didn't need to. One night, as we sat in Matt's living room, Jason turned to me with a small smile. You know, he said, I thought we were stuck here forever, in that house, in that mess. But maybe it's not about what we leave behind. Maybe it's about what we choose to build. That was the moment I realized how much we had changed, how much we had grown, not just from running away, but from standing up for ourselves, from choosing what was right for us, even when it meant losing everything we'd known. We were still finding our way, still figuring out what the future looked like, but the difference was that now we had the freedom to do it on our own terms. And that's the lesson I carry with me every day. You don't have to accept the life you've been given if it's broken. You don't have to stay in a place that hurts you just because it's familiar. You have the power to choose a new path, even if it's scary, even if it means leaving behind everything you thought you knew. You get to choose peace. You get to choose freedom, and that's a choice worth making. Now, as I sit here in a quiet home that feels more like mine with every passing day, I know the hardest parts are over. There will always be challenges ahead. There always are. But they won't come from the walls of a house that never let us breathe. They won't come from the voices of people who tried to define us by their expectations. Jason and I are still learning how to be siblings in this new life. We still argue sometimes, still have misunderstandings. But we're healing, and that's enough for now. We're figuring out how to stand tall, how to support each other without the weight of old wounds pulling us down. And when I look ahead, I no longer feel trapped. I feel hopeful. It wasn't just about leaving home. It was about finding who we were supposed to be, outside of their stories, outside of their expectations. We chose our own future, and that future is ours.